want to share a side-by-side photo to illustrate the point that just because one is labeled with a mental health diagnosis doesn't mean that one needs to be destroyed by it. So the first picture is when I was put on antipsychotics the very first time, and it was probably in July of 2011. And I'm just putting it beside a picture of me recently to show that in 5.5 years, I haven't deteriorated, physically at least. But it's also to show that if I would have remained on antipsychotics, I likely wouldn't be where I am today. So I was put on them and it gave me an akathisia reaction. I thought I was going to jump off a bridge. So I went back to the hospital and I insisted not to be put on any antipsychotics whatsoever. And it was probably best practice and protocol with the diagnosis I was given of bipolar disorder for me to be on antipsychotics. And I insisted not to be. And I just imagine where the trajectory of my health would have gone had I not insisted and had I not been listened to. I was listened to. Luckily, I had a new doctor, young doctor, and she really collaborated with me, and I was very fortunate, because I could have had somebody like I had in April who was just like, no, you're going on antipsychotics. So here's the picture. And again, that's a picture of not being on antipsychotics for the entire 5.5 years that I've been labeled. I was on other medication, but I feel antipsychotics are very damaging. And the next picture is, there's a couple of pictures. One is a couple of days before I was hospitalized. I was suffering internally, but I looked okay. And that was April 2nd, 2016. And then the next picture is April 19th, 2016. And that's when I was put on antipsychotics and I was being tapered up to long-term high-dose antipsychotics. And then the next picture is a month later, on May 17th, I went home from the hospital in like May 4th or something, and by May 17th I was probably on just a little tiny bit of the antipsychotics because I managed to switch doctors and was tapered down off the antipsychotics that I said I didn't want to be put on in the first place. And so, as you can see, I'm happy, smiling, almost back to myself, didn't need long-term antipsychotics. I feel like when that distress happens to me, I need a bit of a reset, I need a bit of a respite, but I don't need daily fear-based, oh my God, it's gonna come back. It might come back, but when it comes back, it's just temporary. So I don't need daily stuff. And how many other people are just over-medicated just because it's a fear-based, what if, just in case mentality. And the thing is, I wouldn't even be against that if it didn't have all the terrible side effects, and if people actually were able to live happy and healthy lives while taking it. But most of the times, being on the medication is nearly as painful as being off. And the thing is, it's daily pain versus extreme pain for a week. So I'd rather have extreme suffering for 1 week than pain and discomfort and weight gain and everything every single day. But it takes some awareness to be able to manage that, I guess, or not even manage that, but be able to advocate for oneself to not be poisoned daily. So yeah, those are some more pictures, just illustrating what my face looks like when I'm on those antipsychotics. It wouldn't get better, that's for sure. My face would just get more and more bloated and everything. And this isn't to say it's about cosmetics. It's just to show that what is happening on the outside is mirrored on the inside. And if it's not making me happier, it's not making me better. It's just making me more stuck, really. It makes it stuck. It makes it so it can't move through. The process can't move through me. I get stuck there, and I get stuck in that pain. And that's why, again, in the psych ward, I didn't take very many PRNs at all. A couple the first few days, and I was in there for like a month. And then after that, it's like, no, I'm just gonna take the pain. I've been having dreams the last couple of nights, and I haven't been sleeping quite as well. So I need to be a little bit more watchful, for sure. I had a dream that I was at this performance, and a woman was telling a joke, and it was taking a bit for the joke to unfold. But it's sort of like, you have to be paying attention, you have to be listening to the joke as it unfolds. If you miss something, you're not going to get the joke. And then this person was talking in a linear way and talking over the joke teller. And they were talking about music, but they were talking about how after a certain part of the music, you have to do this other part of the music. And they were sort of, even though it wasn't related to the joke, in the dream it felt like it was. But what was happening was, this person, instead of listening to the joke, was getting caught up in all this factual stuff, like, oh, this is the logical linear way, and blah, blah, blah. And I was trying to whisper to this person, like, it's a joke. Like, be quiet and listen so you can get the joke. And you're actually kind of ruining it for people by talking over the joke. And the person was just very stuck in that, and I got really mad. I was like, this person is just too dumb to get it. So that was sort of the thing. It's like, I don't know, maybe people are just too dumb to get it, to get the joke. The joke is on us. The joke is us. We're the joker and the joke. And I was talking on the phone with the lady from True Hope the other day, EMP, and she was talking about how if we get something from the outside, the body gets lazy and stops making it. And she was talking about melatonin. She was saying if we take melatonin every night, the body gets lazy and stops making it. And I was actually taking melatonin every night because I have some, and I was actually just trying to use it up. So I realized, oh, maybe I should stop taking it. So that could be part of my sleep troubles. I'm not taking melatonin. But I actually felt like, when I heard her say that, I'm like, there's an extrapolation there. But it didn't really occur to me what it was. And I might have written down something about it, but I don't remember. But then this morning when I was laying in bed, an extrapolation came to me. And that might be part of the joke too, is we can't extrapolate the joke. We can't find the greater meaning within the linear words being said if we're busy with our own linearity put over top of it. So it's not about listening to the words of the joke to logically understand the joke. It's about listening and waiting for that extrapolation to arise to get it. And just as we can do that with humor as part of our humanity, we can do that with wisdom. And that's actually part of what leads me back to the thing about getting things from the outside. So the extrapolation that came to me was that when we're busy looking for the answers outside, in the next how-to, in the next program, in the next person that comes our way, when we're busy trying to get it from the outside, information, we're not connected to our inner wisdom, because when we're trying to get it from the outside, we're taking it from the outside, our mind, our being, our wisdom, our inner wisdom gets lazy and turns off. Just like if we take melatonin, the body stops making melatonin. If we take information, the body stops making information. We're so busy looking for it out there that we've forgotten that those realizations actually come from the inside. By looking, just as children, if we look at something, we'd probably have an aha moment before we knew about aha moments. We probably existed as eureka and serendipity all the time because we'd see connections. So it's about seeing connections, which is part of the extrapolation process, which isn't about seeing right or wrong, which isn't about seeing good or bad, which isn't about judging things according to our past memories and our opinions, which are just memories of other sentences people gave us, and then we live a life sentence of other people's sentences, and we're not actually creating our own sentences. We're not creating our own words by perceiving in the moment, because we're looking for the answers out there. And then we're looking for the answers out there in order to translate that into our inner voice, to repeat in our heads, to try and remember something interesting to say next time. When, if we're interested and curious, what we want to say will arise. And that's part of this voice reversal process. When we're not translating information from the outside into our voice and repeating it, we can see the outside, and that gets translated into our real voice. So it's this voice reversal process. And I actually feel that's partly what I connected with in Mania the first time. I remember I was always talking to myself back then. So self-dialogue right now for me is partly embodied mania, because I talked about do the things you would do in mania, just do it without feeling that mania. Well, that's what I'm doing now, because I was talking to myself a lot. And I recorded a lot of it on audio because it was 6 years ago, and video just, it wasn't as fast and things, and phones weren't as powerful. So this is part of embodied mania, self-dialogue apparently, but I feel it's become more pruned in that if I would go back and listen to what I talked about before 6 years ago, there was probably some insightful things, but there was also stuff that was sort of out there. It's almost like those bits of that other voice of the inner wisdom are very disjointed and disconnected, and it's like speaking them and forming random brain cells here and there and here and there until it creates enough of a matrix in the brain of fluid brain cells to start to make the connections. And then when it does that, then when the neurons fire, they're firing in the right pattern, and they're creating the right pattern of firing in the right waves of energy in there that's actually more congruent with the outside, and the outside is the inside. So we get connected with that inner wisdom. And it reminds me of how Dr. Albert V, I can never say his last name, Vitilido, I could say his last name, I just never remember how it's spelled. He writes the book One Spirit Medicine, which is a great book actually, and he talks, when I went to see him speak in person, I remember him saying that nature selects for wisdom. And I feel like this is the wisdom. It's the wisdom of perception. When we can actually see and give voice to that which we see, not repeating a voice of that which we saw for the last 30 years. That's not wisdom, that's just recordings. And life is not a recording. This is not a recording. We're either recording or we're reordering. We can reorder our brain cells, or we can cause them to become more comfortable with being fluid and dynamic, or we can record and cause the brain cells to congeal together. And now they talk a lot about rewire your brain, and I'm thinking, I don't think we want any wires in our brain. We want fluid matrix. So they're always selling us the next best habit, the next best thing to rewire our brain with. And I feel like if we wire our brain, we're creating tunnel vision. We're creating that reality tunnel of that habit, of that wire. I feel like we don't want any wires. It's more like de-wire your brain. We want wires as nerves that power our arms and our muscles, because it's very limited in the motion, you know, it just moves in space-time like this. But our brain cells, they need to be infinitely pliable, as Krishnamurti would say, not wired. If we wire something, we're saying, oh yes, this person knows something that I don't know, and I'm going to imitate them. Part of this self-dialogue with myself is it's something that it can't be imitated. I'm not saying this is how you do this or this is how you do that. It's more about the dialogue process and how dialogue, always being new, as it's not discussion, it's not debate. Debating is baiting old neurons. One can always see something new. So if we try to get wisdom from the outside, we stop making it from within. We stop creating our own inner wisdom. And it makes sense with the stuff I was talking to myself about. If we only have our own inner voice going on, which isn't our voice at all, it's old stuff people told us translated into our voice, we're not going to hear our real voice, which is the voice that happens when we don't hear that recorded voice going on repetition. Because that sound is what's in the way. It's blocking the totality of the light coming in. Because that sound produces images that are in the way of what it is that we're supposed to see. It's projecting a pattern and image out into reality if we're seeing things while we're going about our day. And that's likely partly what causes the blind spot as well, is that we're blind because we have this thing on our mind screen in the way. So then the brain has to fill in the rest. Otherwise there'd just be this dark hole there, and that would just be weird. I feel like maybe we don't have a blind spot when we're no longer projecting. We're projecting our past onto the present. And then we can't see the present, and we can't speak about the present moment. If we could speak from the present moment, we wouldn't be bored, we wouldn't have desire, we wouldn't have all these things, and all those things are the things that are in the way of seeing in the present moment. So it's a loop. And the main thing of it all is that we can't see what we're doing, and therefore we can't see, and therefore we can't see what we're doing. And that's part of why map consciousness is important. It shows us what we're doing, and it's kind of a scary process to see that and to experience that. But since we can't see what we're doing, how are we going to have our vision restored? Well, the universe sometimes has to do it for us, and for some of us. We become seekers instead of seers. We're seeking information. We're seeking getting better instead of seeing. And if we can see properly, we can act properly, and we would naturally unfold and get better, and it would just happen. Because everything happens without us doing anything anyway. We just think we're actually doing something. And that's part of the scary process of map consciousness, is we see we're not doing anything, it's just happening. But we're thinking that we're doing something, therefore we think we're doing something. So when that thinking process starts to switch from doing to witnessing, seeing, and happening and understanding, to understanding what's happening, versus trying to do something about what's happening and thinking we're doing something when really things are just happening. And because we're seeking something else, we can't see what arises within us, within our consciousness, when we're not seeking, but we're seeing. But most of us, we don't want to see what we're doing. We don't want to see what we're doing to ourselves. We don't want to see what we're doing to each other. And we really see that in map consciousness. It starts off really wonderful, and then at the end it's like, oh my God, like, look what we're doing to each other. Look what we're doing to each other, look what we're doing to ourselves. And then the people that go through that and fall out of it at the end, look what's done to them. And that just amplifies the tragedy of it all. We might be getting somewhere in reality when people who go through this transformation, through this inner journey, are treated as such and not as pathological, because they really have gone through heaven and hell, and they probably have things to share about their journey, but nobody listens because people are just labeled and written off. And so, again, this is me talking to me, and if anyone ever sees this, it isn't about listening to me. It's about listening to oneself, which is waiting for something else to pop up. So if one only hears one's own judgments and opinions of, oh, this is great, this is bad, this is good, that's going to prevent that inner extrapolation from happening, because the whole point is extrapolation. And if you start to be able to begin to extrapolate for yourself, you will feel self-reliant. You won't feel dependent on everything that is trying to buy our attention. And that's part of the whole desire, is we've been programmed to look outward because of all the marketing and everything, and then we desire this, we desire that. And because we're so focused on desires from marketing and everything, our brain has been warped in that way. And since it's been warped in that way, it's not in this calm, relaxed witness state, observing, waiting, happening. And then that's when it can actually create the right internal chemistry in the brain. It can create those 5 neurochemicals of flow. Right now we're creating so much dopamine that just as if I take melatonin from the outside, I'm going to stop making it. Well, if I'm creating too much dopamine on the inside, that's going to change my DNA epigenetically to create all that dopamine, because I'm addicted to it. Our brains are addicted to dopamine, so then it can't actually create that richness of our inner pharmacy that we can create for ourselves. We can create that for ourselves when we can see. And then it's just naturally created, and then we're in flow. If we can see, we're in flow. Flow is of perception, because only through perception can we act. If we don't see something, we can't act on it. And we have this blind spot of 50% of our visual field. We're definitely not acting in full capacity in reality. We're reacting constantly to the past. We're living in the past. That 50% of the visual field that we do have is just our past and our past projections. There's 50% of the world that we're missing, which is more about creation and wisdom and seeing and unfoldment. So extrapolation is just the same as how the brain interprets humor. It knows there's some other meaning than just x plus y equals z. And just as some people might find something funny and some people might find something not funny, either way, the person is intending to be humorous. So through the extrapolation process, one might find something interesting or not interesting, but it's still extrapolation. So our brain has this other process of seeing and meaning making and playing with words and using words creatively as opposed to destructively. Words are creative when we speak from what we see, not from what we know or knew or think from before. And I feel like this is about getting the brain to learn again. And one of the ways to get the brain to learn is to speak about what one sees in the moment, because the sound of our own voice creates brain cells. It either wires our brain in these circular loops, in these grooves, in this scar tissue in the brain. We're scarring ourselves by repeating the same things over and over. Just like if I was just to touch my own leg constantly for the next 10 years, there would be a mark there, even if I touch it lightly, even if it seems subtle. And I wonder what happens if I keep talking to myself this way in self-dialogue. I feel like when I started this process, I had no intention, I had no motive really, and I still don't. And perhaps that's what allows me to see things that I never thought that I would see, because if I had a certain motive, I'm only going to see within that narrow framework. So don't be lazy. Make your own wisdom. Make your own meaning. And I recall talking about how mania is a meaning-making process. It's hyper-meaning. And that's part of what happens when the brain turns on. And it feels really meaningful at first, because to actually learn in that way feels meaningful. Having different insights and thoughts occur, new thoughts, not old thoughts, but new thoughts, feels meaningful because it hasn't happened that way. And all of a sudden everything feels hyper meaningful. But the process of self-dialogue and unfolding it more and more, the meaning isn't attributed to any particular thing. It's more like there's no meaning but to really see the new. Because everything is always new anyway. It's just a matter of being able to step back into that vantage point, because we're always seeing the old, because we see our old thoughts. So even when thinking, one could see that's not new. And if it's not new, it's not now.